Hey everyone, as requested, this is the video for Art of Conquest, all the hero changes that are coming up. We're just going to go through the list and talk about how the heroes are currently used and how the changes are going to affect them. So Rufio first. The only high-level use I've seen for Rufio on any server is jumping on spiders in the backline. He basically just tanks a bunch of damage and acts as a distraction. His change to Chopping Blade now does more single target damage and less area damage. Technically, that makes this better for the thing he's actually used for. But he's still a pretty bad hero. I wouldn't purchase him. I wouldn't pick him of the starting three because Avril is still better. And Avalon is still nuts. So this does not make Rufio good. It just makes him better if you made the mistake of picking him. Destructive 1 no longer reduces the number of troops that Rufio can lead into battle. Damage multiplier is slightly adjusted. It's like 1.2 now instead of 1.4. It's still not worth points over his just regen ability because really all he's good at is tanking damage. Ice Vortex on Avril. This is a nerf. It increases the single target damage but reduces the area damage. The thing is that the freeze effect is based on the amount of damage the targets take. And so now it's less likely to freeze a biggish group of units. It used to be before if you hit a front line of tightly packed units like humans, and almost any of the human units, you know, swordsmen, archers, spearsmen, it would freeze 6 to 8 of them, and now it'll kill one of them and not freeze the other 7 sitting next to him, which overall is a nerf because when you spec into things for Avril, it's usually about control. Blizzard was increased in damage, which is good because it gives them a freeze effect, more reliability, but also increased in mana, so you can cast it a third less often. You want to think of it that way. 3 casts was 6 mana, and now 2 casts is 6 mana, so you're casting it a third as often for the same mana, which is not great. Gifted Mage was unchanged, they just moved a level, and then Rapid Cast. It now allows you to cast twice per fight, and you reduce the cooldown time between casts. Realistically, this is still pretty bad. It wasn't great before, and with the increase in mana costs, it's still bad. Unless there is at some point introduced a reliable source of mana potions into the game, having really high mana cost spells that are very impactful is okay, but you got to accept the fact that you're just not going to use them that often. Or only use them in fights that super matter, and otherwise you're just going to not use them, which is not great. It's still good for Tactics School, because Double Blizzard in Tactics School is free. Right, you can respec her for that and then spec her back out. Valari was basically nerfed into uselessness. She got some interesting changes, but the big reason that most people own Valari were 2 reasons. One, Energy Potion, which has been completely removed, and Crackling Flames. Crackling Flames was the 3-way split on her ability, on her auto attack, that when it procced basically did suppression fire level damage. It was pretty close to that, and that chance has been reduced from 100% to 25%. So the primary in-combat utility she had is gone, and the primary out-of-combat utility she had is gone. So she's pretty dead. Rain of Fire had its damage increased, wasn't very good, now costs 3 mana, makes it not worth casting, basically, except the fact that I think it's pretty much the only good spell she has left, so if you have her, you're going to cast it. And then new ability, Burning, unlocks level 5, grants a damage bonus over time, burning effect to all of Valari's fire attacks, which adds a little bit of damage to everything she does, but is still pretty questionable. And then Fire Dance was increased to 4 mana cost as well. Avalon, summon archers. All the summon abilities got changes. So the higher the level of your stronghold, the higher the level of these summons now. And the greater the command, the greater the power of the archers. And in-game, there is a cap on the amount of power that can be summoned based on the level. So really and when they say power, they're basically saying the number of archers, right? Because if you can summon 100 power worth of archers and each archer is 20 power, then you can summon 5 archers. That's how the math works out in game. The tooltip in game is actually clearer in this case. Warhorn unlocks level 3. When Avalon takes the battlefield, he blows his Warhorn, increasing the attack speed of nearby allies. This is interesting. I actually have a little bit of a surprise for you. Boom! So these do not currently have Warhorn on them. Now they have Warhorn on them. No Warhorn? Warhorn. So it's anything that is adjacent within 2 squares of Avalon, but not on the diagonal. So right, like this is fine, but this is not. Even though this is within 2 squares of him, it's on a diagonal. That's just how it works. So if you invest into this, you're probably going to put Avalon next to some big, powerful, probably gold backline units, and it's going to affect how you structure your army. Since a lot of people have a weak side, strong side dynamic for dwarves and humans to get a morale boost, obviously he's going to be on the strong side. That's how that's going to work. So really, really good. Increased attack speed is obviously fantastic. And that's going to almost push Avalon into being everyone's primary command dump if you get a command item or a command plus. That's probably going to go in Avalon because Warhorn is just really, really good. Ardent Aura, new ability, unlocks level 5. Avalon leads an extremely disciplined army. While he is on the battlefield, all humanoid units have their max hit points increased. So your army just gets harder to kill across the board if you run certain compositions. Seems pretty good. Natural Leader now unlocks at level 10. It's still the same, but now it's 3 points for that initial get to use one more unit in battle thing, which is a lot. 3 points is a lot considering that is, you know, the first 2 levels of one of these more basic abilities. And if you're playing human, you're obviously going to want Ardent Aura to be very high. Everyone's going to want Warhorn to be very high, and you still have Archer Mastery, which humans are going to want really high. So, yeah, it's Avalon's going to need a lot of points, and I'm not sure having an extra unit on the field is worth it over buying it. Because you can already, because if you buy one hero, and $10 is pretty reasonable for one hero, you get to 14 units already. Humans can't even put that 15th unit on the field. Lich and Dwarf can because of tanks and spiders. So for Lich and Dwarf, they're gonna have an easy time spending. It's gonna be win a 1-point natural leader, and the rest in Warhorn and then an arrow volley. And humans are gonna have a hard time justifying those 3 points. Elena, this now allows them to just retreat from the battlefield basically, and it's a standalone cooldown timer. So you can use it in between other abilities whenever you want to, basically. It can be casted for free, so that's a nice little boost. Call the Cavalry, same thing. It's now based on the higher the level of your stronghold, and the greater command, the greater number of troops that can be summoned, and it's based on, again, on power. Saving Lives unlocks a little earlier. Ready and Willing unlocks a little earlier. This is really good if you're buying Elena early on in a server, because you're going to get a lot more experience much earlier on. And then this is the big thing for Elena's changes, magic resistance. Unlocks level 10. When Elena is deployed, the magic damage taken by all allied units is reduced by a certain percentage. The reason this is a big deal, if you think about one of the main reasons that Lich is so great in PvP, is they have the magical creature on scorpions and spiders. And that makes them take less magic damage, which means they basically take less damage from all hero spells. Hero spells used correctly and timed well are one of the strongest things that swing fights in duels, which, you know, matters in captures or dueling for fun or for carts or for pride or whatever. Giving an entire army magic resistance means that the more defensive things, like Favor of the Sun God and passives that don't necessarily do magic damage but buff your army, are going to be better if Elena becomes a really popular hero in PvP. And that could affect the overall meta of the game quite dramatically. So something to keep an eye out for. Mana Barrier got buffed a little bit. Mana Barrier was only really good in the early game because all of your mana should have been going to Favor past a certain point anyway, because all of your points go into Favor. You really want to max that out as soon as possible. So that's a nice mid-early game change, but it doesn't really matter. And then this is the biggest nerf of this entire patch. Favor of the Sun God now costs 5 mana instead of 3. So almost twice as much. And again, with the mana cost increase, you're not going to cast the spell less. You're just going to get into situations where you need the spell less. Every time you would have really needed to cast the spell, you're still going to have it. But you're just going to be like, well, I can't siege that level X castle because in order not to lose units, I would need to cast Favor, and I can't. So I'm not going to siege that level X castle. Again, not a really good source of mana potions anywhere in the game. So it's just a huge nerf. Virion, his bubble was changed, so now instead of making him completely invincible, it reduces damage done by 95%, which isn't a reasonable balance change because he was a little too strong, but he still gets affected by stuns and attack speed slows now, which means that the value of Lionheart Blade went down considerably if you have someone slowing his attack speed through the defense, because he's not likely to heal up. Get a couple procs of Lionheart Blade before he dies. So this is a bigger nerf than it seems, and it seems like a big nerf. So something bear that in mind. That said, 95% is still a lot less damage taken, and there's not that many attack speed slows in the game. Lionheart Blade also changed to do more area damage. This is technically a buff because it's nice to finish off a target when you hit it and then move on to the next target. He didn't really need the splash damage. It wasn't really a benefit to him. So for him, it's a little bit of a buff. Summon Swordsman. Again, all of these summon spells were buffed, and he'll be able to summon a reasonably sized group of footmen. Crusader Shield was nerfed significantly. I can't level it very much, but it seems to be like almost a 50% nerf on PTR. My Varian's not high enough level to know what the full nerf was, because I can't get him up to a full 7 points invested. But it's a pretty significant nerf. And then Crusader Resurrection now costs 4 mana, was 3. I think I have over 100 mana on my Varian, because I never cast any spells with him. I think a lot of people are in the same boat. So this, if you're using this, it matters. If you're never using this, this doesn't matter, because it's going to be hard to run out of mana on it regardless. Gan greatly increased the trans health and damage, and then Earthquake increased the damage dealt and greatly increased the damage dealt to fortifications. I think I've seen fights where Earthquake did like 30,000 damage to a wall, and now it's increased. But that said, Gan's still pretty weak. I haven't seen anyone on PTR use him, and I've never heard of anyone being happy with him that I've talked to on older servers. Even people who basically got him for free out of a chest, they're just like, I never use that guy for anything. So yeah. Teadrin, Glory Hammer, changed from area of effect damage to high single target damage with a small amount of splash damage. Again, for her, it's a little bit of a buff. And then Sacrifice active, increase the damage radius while slightly reducing damage dealt, cost 4 mana, was 3. This was the ability where she sacrificed a portion of her health to summon a giant sword, I believe. And it wasn't really used. The people who play Teadrin play her primarily for her aura. It does bonus damage to undead, but it actually does damage to everything on the battlefield. It's a little footnote people miss when they read the ability. They're like, man, that does a lot of damage to undead, but no one uses undead, and they skip past her. It actually does damage to everything. So if you stack a Teadrin enough, she gets pretty scary. So nothing that Teadrin players use was changed, and therefore the changes are irrelevant because no one was using those things. Gazul, Fearsome Aura, was moved, not changed in any way. Skeleton Sacrifice can be casted for free, and you greatly increase the summon Skeleton Titan's health and damage. This is actually a huge buff. Skeleton Sacrifice has some pretty interesting PvP implications, and it's a tech choice. I'm going to be making a video about that soon-ish. I need to wait for a good fight to happen so I can show you what I'm talking about, because no one's going to believe me if I don't have a fight to back it up. But Skeleton Sacrifice getting buffed is a bigger deal than it seems. Skeleton Mastery, new ability unlocks level 4. Gazul excels at leading skeletal troops into battle. When he takes to the battlefield, all allied Marauders, Ravagers, Stalkers, those are the skeletons, and Acolytes, Occultists, Warlocks, those are the mages, and Pikemen, those are the neutral mercenaries, have their max damage and health increased. This is affected by command. If you had a fully undead army, humans are really good because you have the situation where their units can be buffed. This is one hero that buffs your entire army, with the caveat that they all have to be undead. And you can't res them, but then you have Cleo and Eclipse and Tome of Redemption, and then they res, right? Also, mummies in the coming patch, if they raise a unit in a fight, you get to keep that unit at the end of the fight. So there's a real possibility that with a maxed out Gazul and a maxed out Cleo, undead are not only viable, but better than Scorpion Spider. And you have this potential of actually gaining troops. I'm going to experiment with this when the patch goes live. I have mummies on one of my Lich accounts already, researched for wall defense, because I was using them as a blood diamond dump. I'm just going to start sticking mummies in my my armies, in my fights against humans and dwarves, and see if the units I get out of having mummies are worth it. Like, do I raise enough units consistently from playing with mummies that it would be worth it to research the undead units and actually play with them? And I'll have an answer for you probably a couple weeks after the patch goes live. Mortal Strength, new ability unlocks level 5. Gazul's immortal power grants extra power to undead units around him. When he's on the battlefield, all allied undead units have their max hit points increased by a certain percentage. So, again, damage and max health increased, and then this increases their health again, which makes them even harder to kill. Just sounds pretty insane overall. Pretty insane. And then Soulless Scourge was nerfed significantly, 5 mana. But if you're not undead and you're not doing skeleton sacrifice tech, Soulless Scourge is basically the only thing you put points into anyway, which is not going to change. You're just going to cast the spell less often. So, unfortunately, wait at this. Tome of Creation was nerfed, cost damage reduced, and now costs 5 mana instead of 3. The 6.5 second stun over 6 to 8 units is still insane. It still sets you up for really, really big blizzards. And unless you picked Rufio, you have Avril. So Tome of Creation is still absolutely nuts because it's still a really, really good setup spell, and it still, stuns. This crowd control, the damage was always kind of secondary in my mind. It was the huge stun that really, really mattered. If you were up against lower level opponents, you one-shot their stacks. It looked impressive, but you were gonna kill the stacks anyway, right? It wasn't that big a deal. Soul Blast on Raxius can now be cast only after placing lanterns on the battlefield. There's no ability cooldown as long as there are lanterns on the battlefield. The ability can be cast. For those of you who know how Raxius works, that's a little bit of a buff. For those of you who don't worry about it. Greatly increase the spirit's damage and health. Cost 4 mana, was 3. Not a very good ability. Didn't get used very often, and that's technically a nerf overall because 4 mana is still significant. They doubled the area covered by the web, the active of Rose. No one I saw really ever spec'd into this, so doubling it probably might make it viable. I haven't seen anyone in PTR doing it. They've still just been heavily investing when they play Rose into command items and the bonus to spiders. So, new ability for Grims. They removed Siege Master and now unlocks level 4. This is a standard ability instead of a final ability. When Grimm's on the battlefield, the siege weapons of all races have their max damage and hit points increased by a certain percentage. So now you don't have to have a dwarf alt to have maximum siege damage. You can just have catapults or cannons or ballistas or whatever and be in good shape. Pretty good. Ammo Wagon unlocks earlier, and now Reload Ammunition is his final ability instead of a lower level ability. Reload Ammunition was always pretty costly in terms of energy, and at 3 points, 6 points, 9 points, 12 points, I don't think it's going to be as good. I think people are going to skip it and just go for more Ammo Wagon and more Siege Master, more Suppressive Fire, and still that one critical point Smoke Bomb. Gafgar, Startling Blow, changed from area of effect to high single target damage, less splash. Again, same thing. Repairman, new ability unlocks level 3 when Gafgar is on the battlefield. All allied mech units have their max hit points increased, which is insane because mechs in the very, very late game with full upgrades have the highest effective hit points of any unit in the entire game already. And increasing it by some percentage is just ridiculously strong. The reason that is because in the late game, range damage ends up scaling a little bit better on pretty much every race. So archers end up, archers are strong in the early game. They're the strongest unit damage-wise in the late game. And so having half damage from ranged abilities makes mechs have really high effective hit points with upgrades and scaling and all that. And this just gives them even more of the same. So that's really good. Dwarf Warrior Specialist now unlocks level 4. This is the one that increased the HP and damage of Dwarf Warrior specifically. Temporary Repair. This is the heal over time for mechs. So obviously if you're going to do some sort of mech strategy, you're going to want Gafgar. No question there. And then Iron Shield. Increase the damage reduction and duration. So it's you take less damage, but for a shorter period of time. So timing it is going to become more critical. Nora, who, as far as we can tell, is still not in the game, except for very lucky people, allows all of Nora's abilities to be cast twice, and when upgraded, reduces the cooldown time of Nora's abilities. That's really good if you have her. Most people do not. And then Jax. Jax is, again, another 3 energy per deployment hero. Greatly reduce the amount of ammo expended for Firestorm, reduce the damage dealt by each bullet, and when upgraded, increases the firing duration. So you're not going to run out of ammo using Firestorm once anymore, which is a pretty big buff. Rocket Launcher, ammo costs reduced, and reduce the damage a little bit, but that's fine because ammo was the big problem. And then Double Charge, reduce the ammo cost and slightly reduce the damage dealt. This is a net buff for Jax, I think, and Jax was already one of the strongest heroes. His only real downside was its 3 energy per deployment, which makes him a pain to level. But with the Hero Exchange program, if you already have like a level 25 or level 26 hero and you're just swapping it for Jax, you may be in a good spot. You may be in a really good spot. Bane. New specialty. Previously, when learning Barbaric Blessing, the number of troops Bane could lead into battle reduced to 1. This has now been changed into a specialty. Bane can only lead one troop group into battle. So this, you don't have to spend points for this. This is something you just have, which technically, I guess, means it's more efficient point-wise. You just have it. Provoke unlocks level 1. Can now be casted for free. Was 1 energy. And no longer mitigates all damage when cast. Only mitigates physical damage. So no more spelling him down. Ferocious Charge. Now costs 1 energy. Was free. Damage doubled. This is the ability he has that splits fights in half when he charges in. And then Barbaric Blessing no longer reduces the number of troops that Bane can lead into battle and no longer increases the energy limit. Instead, now increases stamina and physical damage mitigation. Bane is not very good. The problem with Bane is that if you can build Berserkers, you're human. And Berserkers are really good for one thing, and it's plundering. But Archers are better because ranged units are inherently better. They started attacking the wall sooner, and you can deploy more of them. Because 4 Berserkers and the wall is crowded. There's no more spots left. If you actually deploy 4 Berserker units, 1 or 2 of the Berserkers will wander around constantly, never actually attacking the wall. There's just not enough room. Whereas 6, 7, 8 Archers packs can all attack the wall at the same time. So Berserkers suck. And getting Berserkers and buffing Berserkers is the #1 thing Bane is good for. And if the #1 thing a hero gives you is something that sucks, the hero is not good. So Bane is still pretty bad. That's the review of all of the heroes. I don't honestly think things changed that much. I still think Cleo has the most overpowered dueling ability in the form of Tome of Creation. It's just that you won't be able to cast it as often, and it's not going to kill backline units anymore. You're going to have to follow it up with Blizzard. But if you were dealing higher level opponents, you were having to do that anyway. Cough, cough. Not something I have to deal with on a regular basis. Whales and so forth. Undead might be viable is the biggest change. Undead might being viable with Gazul is honestly the biggest change this patch, and it requires a lot more testing and a lot more research, literally and figuratively, because you're going to need to research undead units to see if it's actually worth doing. Summon units get buffed. Avalon is even stronger than he was, and everything costs more mana. So that kind of sucks. If you're thinking about the Hero Exchange program and you have Valari or Cleo, or Lena or Jax, you should have some information now to figure out who you might consider changing out and who for. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know what you thought. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.